One thing Darius going to do is speak his mind. Okay, he had a lot to say in this clip. Actually, very informative. A lot of it I had already kind of spoke on, but you know, sometimes the little folks ain't really heard. But when a big dog talk, more people will hear. But check out what he had to say. He also speaks on Karina and Miss Netta. I mean, she's in the mix with the whole Duchess thing anyway. So check out what he had to say. This is my part 2. What are your thoughts?
Sometimes if you do have $2 or $3 to rub together, it's going to leave a couple of clues. And unfortunately, we ain't saying that. So if Duchess does decide, let's say, to go through with the lawsuit after you done spent $10,000 to $12,000 to sue Joe, right? What are you getting in return? Because Joe does not have anything to give you, right? Anything nominal, right? You saw you done paid 10 G's to sue somebody. You should be walking out of there with at least 50. At least 50, right? Joe don't have that. Joe don't have that. And you and I both know that Joe does not have that. So trademarking Miss Netta's name only for the sake of some sort of financial gain doesn't make any sense. And then here's the bigger part. If in fact you do plan on trademarking somebody's name, let it have some value, right? You've gone through all this work to trademark a name that has no value whatsoever. You certainly can't use this name in any capacity. There is not one, well, there are a few people. There is not a majority of people who would nearly be interested in buying anything from Netta. So now you have this name trademark, Miss Netta, and you're going to slap it on a product. Nobody's buying it. The reason nobody's buying it is because it's left a negative impression in the people's mind about who Joe really is. So even if you put the name on something, nobody is going to be interested. And the way this online space works, it really only works best when the person who created the product uses the product in their live streams. I don't make the news. I just report it. If somebody else went live and tried to use a Darius Cook's everyday skillet and then use an everyday skillet in their live stream to sell the skillet, it's not going to have the same effect as if I did it, right? It's not going to have the same effect. So you want something of some value if you're going to go out here trademarking somebody's name. And unfortunately, the name doesn't really have any value. And not only that, but the name is already seen in a negative light, right? There are not a lot of people who are fond of Joe and Charles, Netta and Charles. If I could be honest, the only reason people watch these days is to see if there's anything new. But a lot of times when people would watch this stuff, they watch it, ain't nothing new. Okay, next, right? Keep scrolling. There's not really a lot of positive interaction. And I know what Netta's going to say. Look at my numbers, look at my numbers, look at my numbers. Listen, we can look at those numbers all you want to. But if you're not looking at those numbers in context, the data doesn't mean anything. Data is neither good or bad. It's indifferent. It's what you do with the data that makes all of the difference here, right? And so you may have good numbers, but people are watching you to laugh at you. They are not watching you to support you. They are not watching you to be in a part of a community with you. They are not watching you to learn from you. They are not watching you because you are adding value. They are not watching you because you are solving a problem. They are watching you because you are a science project that is interesting to watch. That is the way, that is the reason they're watching you. So when you say, oh, look at my numbers, baby, those numbers don't mean anything. And furthermore, those numbers really don't mean anything if none of your pages are monetized or if they got demonetized because maybe they were monetized at one point. Okay, now, she did all this. Duchess did all this to spite Joe, right? And you know God not going to bless this. You and I, we've been around long enough to know that God don't bless. You do something out of spite, God not going to bless it. You see what I'm saying? You better off letting it go. That's the reason Karina is out here struggling with Carmen's seasonings. God not going to bless this. You did it out of spite, and so there's no blessing going to come from this. Okay? So she did it out of spite. But I got a couple of pieces of information that I want to share with y'all. Okay? Oh, let me get rid of this heifer. Hold on. Hold on, I gotta block somebody, y'all. Hold on 1 second. I got them. They gone. Okay. First of all, trademark class and usage. Trademarks are registered in a specific category or classes of goods and services. So you do recognize that a trademark is not just a catch-all, right? There's a different class, a different category for trademarks. Okay. Now, we don't know what class or what category Duchess trademarked this name in. And Duchess don't seem to be that smart anyway, because she's doing all this. So if Duchess didn't do her research on how to use this trademark, it's irrelevant, right? You could still use it with no problem. Also, prior usage is also important, right? If Miss Netta's been using her name in commerce before the other party registered the trademark, she might have legal grounds to continue using it. This is called a prior use defense, and it could allow her to challenge the trademark registration or at least continue using her name in certain regions or in certain contexts. Okay, so here we are again. Prior usage counts as a defense strategy. So even if you say, I'm going to trademark this, a judge is going to look at this and go, wait a minute. You weren't using this prior to. You've only used this to spite the person. Does that really make good sense? It does not. And Netta has plenty of proof that this name and likeness was being used prior to it being trademarked. Okay? Also, you have what's called right of publicity. Okay? You have what's called right of publicity. Now, Netta's been using this name for a long time. The name is so popular and so synonymous with Joe that people don't even recognize the likeness as Joe. They recognize the likeness of Miss Netta, which means that in the public's eye, there is really no delineation between the likeness of the person and the name Miss Netta. Miss Netta may be able to argue that her name as her own personal identity cannot be fully trademarked by someone else, especially if the trademark registration was made without her consent. In many jurisdictions, including federal, individuals have a right to publicity which protects the commercial use of their name and their likeness. I'm going to read that one more time. This is a matter of fact here. All right, I'm going to read it one more time. Ms. Netta may be able to argue that her name as her own personal identity cannot be fully trademarked by someone else, especially if the trademark registration was made without her consent, and we know it was. In many jurisdictions, including federal, right, individuals have a right of publicity which protects the commercial use of their name and likeness. Also, there's a challenge that Netta has because the trademark was filed without his knowledge or his consent. So through the legal process and in bad faith, because it infringes on Joe's right as the original name holder, right? It infringes on his right that now he can certainly challenge this in court. Again, I don't see how Duchess is going to win on any of this. In fact, if I was a common sense thinking person, right? If I was a common sense thinking person, this actually hurts Duchess more than it helps him. Okay? If I was thinking with my common sense brain, This actually hurts Duchess more than it helps Duchess, and I'll tell you why. The thing about social media, especially in the context of community, that makes the experience amazing is the fact that two things have to coincide: your character and your integrity. Character is who you are when everybody's looking. Integrity is who you are when nobody can see you. If your character and your integrity are not running parallel, the experience won't be authentic and people will be able to tell. If you are not authentic and you call yourself leading a community, that's an oxymoron.